Hi there, I'm Jason Ross with the Schiller Institute, and I'm very happy today to be speaking with Hussein Askery. Born in Iraq, Hussein Askery has been the Southwest Asia Director of the Schiller Institute for 15 years. Welcome, Hussein.
Thank you, Jason.
Today, we're going to be taking up what has occurred recently with the decision by the Biden administration to drop 7 bombs on Syrian territory near the Syrian-Iraqi border on February 25th. The statement from the US Department of Defense was that these targets were chosen carefully, quote, very deliberately, that this really was a defensive strike meant to help protect American forces and coalition partners. This is how the strike has been presented to the American public as being necessary and in defense. Could you tell us what actually happened? What was this bombing? Was it defensive?
I don't think it's defensive. It has nothing to do with the security situation for the U.S. forces or anything. I mean, the targeting of a few poor Iraqi forces, militiamen or whatever, inside Syria on the border in Abu Kamal, long way from where the U.S. base in Erbil was targeted, and also the American embassy. So this was more an symbolism. It's a show of force. But let me start with this. I think, but because this has been, I'm not going to throw all the reactions because, we had international reactions. We had even inside the United States reactions saying that this is illegal in terms of international law and also in terms of the American Constitution, because it's an act of war and the Congress has not been involved in this decision. This is, as we, exactly the same thing happened a year ago when, before the assassination of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad and the head of the militias. Before that, something exactly similar, a copycat, a probably false flag attack on an American base, also in northern Iraq, was followed by an attack on the Iraqi militias. By the way, the Iraqi militias, most of them are under the defense ministry, and the commander-in-chief is the current prime minister of Iraq. So they were actually put under the Iraqi army after ISIS was defeated in Iraq. And those people are fighting ISIS, the remnants of ISIS, on the border between Iraq and Syria. It has nothing to do with American forces there. So the issue is that this was an ominous, what happened last year was an ominous development, which made Iraq even more unstable. This bombing is not going to help stabilize Iraq. On the contrary, we might have more provocations. And until now, nobody really knows who attacked the American bases. There is no evidence presented that it was exactly these two groups named, that Kataib Hezbollah and Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada there. There is no evidence that they were involved in these attacks. So it could be a false flag, it could be a provocateur, a third party, and so on and so forth. But this has been the situation in Iraq for a very long time. And as you know, Iraq went through several wars since 1991 with the Bush Senior and Thatcher war, the so-called Kuwait War, the Gulf War, which destroyed half of Iraq's infrastructure. Then we got followed by genocidal economic sanctions, which destroyed Iraq's education, healthcare, and hundreds of thousands of people, mostly children, were killed. And then Iraq was invaded again by the British-US coalition, and even more destruction was wrought on Iraq. But since then, we have had an unstable situation. And the fact that Iran is being pulled into this discussion. Yes, Iran has a great deal of influence in Iraq, but the problem is that with the destruction of the Iraqi state, which was Tony Blair's idea, recreating Iraq, and changing the political system into an ethnic sectarian system where different ethnic and sectarian groups share the political power, but it becomes like horse trading the whole time because all these parties are corrupt. They have no idea how to deal with the economy, with the unifying the nation. And we have had corruption and economic disaster for the last 17 years. Iraq merely sells raw oil, and then most of the money is actually stolen by these different political parties democratically, and the rest is used to fulfill Iraq's consumption needs: food, clothing, medicine, everything. Everything is imported from outside Iraq. So the oil revenues come from the front door and they immediately disappear from the back door, and nothing is built. For example, electricity in Iraq, we still have only 4 hours of the national grid per day provided to the households and to the businesses. And like you just experienced that in Texas. And that's the situation in Iraq. All services, everything is simply non-functional. Now, I really want people to watch the Schiller Institute, the one you organized yesterday, Saturday, on the importance of the major powers cooperation. Because what Helga Tsep-Larouche said, the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, is very, very important, because she started her opening remarks by pointing to this incident and saying that this can bring us to the brink of a global war, because the Russian and Chinese reactions were very, very strong. And they called on the United States to abandon that geopolitical destructive policy and start to have, to respect international law, but get into a dialogue on solving all these problems. And of course, the real issue then becomes, how would the major powers and regional powers work together to stabilize the situation? And I think Helga made it very clear that it's economic cooperation which is the basis for such a new order in the region.
So what you just went through about how so much of Iraq's consumption is financed by export of raw materials, as opposed to using raw oil, making products from it, refining it, and then developing the full industrial base. What is going to make it possible for Iraq's economy to be upgraded from one of limited productivity towards being a truly productive nation? How can that happen?
Well, in 2002, I was working with Mr. Lyndon LaRouche on a conference which was held in Abu Dhabi by the Zayed Center in the United Arab Emirates. And it was a conference on the future of oil in international politics. And what Mr. Lyndon LaRouche presented there was a very fascinating thing, but also shocking. I mean, we had like oil ministers from the region. We had the whole UAE cabinet sitting there in the front row listening to Mr. And he said, stop exporting raw oil. You should build nuclear power plants, and then use the oil as an industrial feedstock for chemical, petrochemical, plastics, and all kinds of products, which will increase the added value of the raw oil many times. Here's we have Mr. LaRouche. To his left is the oil minister of the UAE at the time. And so he said, you have two important things. You have, of course, the oil, but if you build nuclear power, which Abu Dhabi did, actually, now they are completing the largest nuclear power complex in nearby Abu Dhabi with the help of a Korean company. But then he said, you should use the fantastic geographical location of Southwest Asia, which people call the Middle East, as a crossroads for world trade and economic cooperation along what we have. I think we have some picture of what Mr. LaRouche's concept of the world land bridge, which now is termed adopted by China as the Belt and Road Initiative. And if you look at the region called the Middle East, it's right in the middle between Asia, Africa, and Europe, which gives it a fantastic possibility to both for growth, but also contribute to international. As we have in this other slide, you see that this region, but also Iraq specifically, is located on both the maritime Silk Road through the Gulf, reaching to Basra in southern Iraq, and then connecting to Syria on the Mediterranean, to Iran, to the Caucasus, to Turkey, and to Europe. So Iraq could become a very interesting hub for communication, for trade, and integration of that region with the global economy economically.